Dawkins, the materialist, hated Rupert Sheldrake, although he was in the same building at Oxford as Dawkins, his office, because he was a biologist, actually. So anyway, that's one thing. And then Taratoku, the late, great Taratoku, the former Kensur of Gyuto Monastery, who was one of my dear friends and great teachers, he told me about the idea that the Buddha Dharma was supposed to last about 2,000 years after Buddha's time. And then the next period of 500 years would be the counterfeit Dharma, fake Dharma. And that it would be terrible, and monks would be fighting over donors, and there would be a lot of conflict and disagreements, and the real Dharma would not be available. There was such a theory. So Sjbccny's time is about 2,000 years after Sjbccny's time. And so he said that he thought, I don't know if other lamas think that way, but he felt, and he indicated that it was a general idea among at least Gelugpa or Gandempa scholars, that Tsongkhapa renewed the Dharma at least in Tibet for 500 extra years, so there's not a fake Dharma there. Although worldwide it was kind of collapsing in different ways and being co-opted by various things, because period of colonialism, I mean, really terrible. Last 500 years has been quite terrible in the world as a whole, and it still is at the moment. We're at the end of that period. So for that reason, I like to call Tsongkhapa a Renaissance man. Now, just want to mention that. And then the sort of main points I want to make in 20 minutes. First of all, in the Lexi Nyingbo, in Tsongkhapa's most masterful philosophical treatise, which my teacher Geshe Wangyal from Gomang Datsang, I'm sorry, he wasn't from Saraje, he was from Gomang Datsang because he was Mongolian. And he made me translate that as a PhD project. Professor Wayman was my teacher at Harvard wanted me to translate Latong Chemo, and the silver book, you know. And then so I was doing that, preparing to do that, and then Geshe Wangyal said, don't do that book, because Wayman thinks he did it, you know, so don't do it, and don't bother him. Instead, you do this book, Lexi Nyingbo, which I hadn't studied. And so then I had a copy of it, though, that His Holiness gave me when I was a monk, a small green copy printed in Kalimpong. And he made some notes in it, actually, of some ideas he had, corrections he had. And so I did that, and at first it was completely impossible. It was really difficult. But it looked golden to me, on the other hand. I had a vision of golden coming out of the pages, like the golden letters going, I was in Spain, and they went out into the ocean, the golden letters. I didn't get to see them in the sky like Sjbccny, but I had that idea. So anyway, in that, I'm sorry, I'm just talking like that. I'm old, you know. So in that book, Tsongkhapa says you cannot have authoritative statement in sutra that you say this sutra says that, so that's absolutely the dogma. You can't do that, because the Sjbccny was a great teacher who would teach people according to their needs. And so sometimes if you took his statements out of context, they could be contradictory to each other. So the only way you can finally determine what is definitive in meaning and what is just interpretable and contextual is by pure reason, critical wisdom, critical reason and logic. You know? And so that was one of Tsongkhapa's great things, you know, is that statement, actually. And he always connected it with this verse that His Holiness loved so much, you know, Gelon Dagam, Kenemje. You know, the monk, oh monks, you know, the wise person always is like a goldsmith who accepts the gold after testing, cutting, burning, rubbing, and then he accepts it if it's worthwhile, and otherwise he rejects it. And so you should be like that when I say something, and don't accept what I say just because Buddha said so. So His Holiness loves to do that, and he begs people. Actually, I once in Switzerland saw him. He blew my mind, actually. And he begs people. He was leaning like, please don't just accept what I say, but think about it and critical thinking and make it and reject it if you don't like it, and then use it in your mind after your own mind has chewed it over, you know. I remember him, and the way the body language was like he was pleading, and he said he even could see Sjbccny begging his students to think about, not just say Buddha said so, you know. And so that's really wonderful. So that's a pure reason. So Tsongkhapa introduced that. Connected to that, Jimbala, in this fantastic book, which I demand the signature. I want the signature. But I love this book. It's such a wonderful book. And in that book, he shows how Tsongkhapa used, he connected the logic, Dharmakirti and Chandrakirti, so which other people had thought was anti-logic, and they all think that today. The Germans, the Japanese, they go around, oh, Chandrakirti, he was trashing logic. He was trashing Dharmakirti. He wasn't trashing Dharmakirti. He was only trashing Baba Viveka's excessively rigid way of dealing with Dharmakirti. He wasn't trashing it at all, and he himself. And therefore, when Chandrakirti shows how you would use a syllogism, rather than just use a consequence, or a dialectical way of doing it, when he does that, then the Japanese, my teacher used to say at Harvard, he's just being mean, because he said he doesn't do syllogisms, and now he's saying if I did, they would be like this. So he doesn't realize that a Prasangika can perfectly well do syllogism without being attached to it as an intrinsically identifiable syllogism. So you know what I'm saying? So Tsongkhapa rectified and connected Chandrakirti and Dharmakirti based on this idea of pure reason, which Shbccny points out very, very nicely. And my friendly friend Ted Arnold is writing a thing. He's going to be based on your platform of your book. He's writing a great thing with more detail about that and how that made the Sakyapas upset, actually. Jeda Rinpoche is doing that the way he do that. And even today, Genjin Chumpa, they all think, the Westerners think it's so smart because he goes, Tanye Pesema, Ayus, right? And they make a big joke out of that. That the Genjin Chumpa does that. Tanye Pesema, Ayus, in his Lutu Gongyen, those of you who know that. He said, but the Tsongkhapa insisted that there is, although conventional reality is all illusory, and it's all a little bit this and that, and can be seen, there's always other perspectives, and there's no final dogma in linear dualistic language. Nevertheless, there is such a thing as conventional validating cognition. That is to say, there's reason, there's correct and incorrect within the illusion. And of course, it's not ultimate and final, but it's very important in navigating the conventional, and you have to navigate the conventional, as Nagarjuna said, in order to realize the ultimate. Right? You need the use of that 24th chapter of the Mula Madhyama Kakari, of the Prajna book, right? So anyway, that's the critical reason. So that's one. Then second, reason in Tantra. Then in Jeda Rinpoche's time, some people who were doing Tantra, they were like, don't give me a creation stage. And my friend Tom Yarno, my colleague, he wrote such a nice book, Jeda Rinpoche's 11th and 12th chapters in the Ngagrim Chimo, about the creation stage, and Jeda Rinpoche is constantly talking there to Tibetans who think, I'm not going to bother with all the weird doorway and all the thing hanging on the rafters and the weird house and all the limbs and fingernails, and I don't want to make, that's a waste of time. It's all conceptualization. Give me Dzogchen. Give me the void. I want to go in space. I want to space out. Well, unfortunately, spacing out by itself just won't work. You just become a space cadet, that's all. You won't become a Buddha. And so Jeda Rinpoche takes the validation of conceptuality within the illusory level, and he builds it right into tantric practice and the essential nature of creation stage practice and creating a different mandala world within which you can then realize more deep things, and you can deal with the idea of space. And actually, if you really look at Unexcelled Yoga Tantra, you'll find that what space really means, it has to do with the ladies, actually. So I don't want to get into that right now. Anyway, they already spaced out, in other words, and they're more spaced out than the guys, and they're smarter. So that's what we discover from that. So, in other words, he carried that same synthesis of the reason and the direct experience into Tantra in a very new and beautiful way. And I believe, but Jimbala, I don't know if this is correct, and you don't touch on that particular thing. Did they have a clear-cut Tantric college in any of the previous, Sakyapa monasteries and other monasteries, Kadampa monasteries before Jeda Rinpoche? I don't think so. So his innovation in Tantra was to create Ngakwe Daktangs, and then Gyuto and Gyume, of course, were just pure Ngakwe Datsang, But then even in Gebon Sarah, you had an Akpedasang, and I believe that was his innovation as an institution. So there he's showing the need for all these complicated arts and all the techniques and also all the shastras. I was shocked myself in my late 30s when I really sort of tried to make an effort to go beyond my Madhyamaka studies. You never get beyond Madhyamaka, but beyond Madhyamaka studies, and more into Tantra, and I thought I'd do some more practice or whatever, I was in that mood. And, but then I discovered there's so much study involved in Tantra. It is so technical. That's why I call it Tantric Abhidharma. But they never use that expression. Asanga used the expression of Mahayana Abhidharma just in one book. And after that, all the Tenjur treatises are really Abhidharma, but they don't use Abhidharma term, sort of out of respect maybe of the Theravada, the Tegman, the individual vehicle, as I like to call it. They don't use the word Abhidharma, but even Tantra has Abhidharma, and that's where you find neuroscience, in fact, I believe, Buddhist neuroscience, the whole chakra system and this kind of thing. So I know I'm trying to keep it in. Then, so that's the same thing. Then in his actions, Rinpoche, he did there's the famous 4 great deeds of Tsongkhapa. And the great deeds do not include his amazing writings, which were a huge deed. That's the 5th great deed, but they don't include that because they just expect that. They take it for granted. And the 4 deeds, one of them is the reaffirming of a special connection to Maitreya, the future Buddha. And this was the Jingji monastery where Rinpoche, during his 5-year retreat with his 8 companions, they went and they got some donations from wealthy nomads, and they rebuilt a famous Maitreya temple where the statue, the famous Maitreya statue there, talked. It was known to talk to people. And it was all had pigeon goop in it, and the roof was collapsing, and etc., and they fixed it up. And that was considered his first great deed. And at the time, people saw in the sky huge visions. And I believe that's another of Rinpoche's innovations. The giant tankas that you have outside the big monasteries that they bring out, and all the schools do it, because I think Rinpoche's innovations affected all of the schools. They didn't just affect, as you also show, they were not a sectarian thing, narrowly just only affecting his new school, but they affect all of them, what he did. And I think those huge tankas are just remembrances of times when people as a collective crowd saw huge visions in the sky, which everybody saw. You didn't have to be psychic to see it. It's a special thing, and Westerners go, oh yeah, it's a collective hallucination, or it's just a fake hagiography, or it's just something fake, because they don't believe in that. Although I don't want to tell the anecdote, but the Wutai Shen in China, Rio Zheng'an, everybody sees those things all the time there, apparently, in the old days. And even under the communists, they did. There was Raoul Birnbaum once gave a talk where he showed a red traffic sign with chains on 2 ends that were blocking a road. And it said, mass visions are illegal in the People's Republic of China. And he had stolen this when he was studying there in China. In the 90s, really, he showed this, he waved it in the American Academy of Asian Studies. He showed that even they're still having those visions there. So then the second man was he reorganized the Vinaya. He brought together the Kagyu and all of the Kagyus, Kadampas, Sakyapas, all of the great people, and he organized, renewal of Vinaya. No more beer in the monastery, no more married monks, no more baloney, no more gomchens. He did that. That's the second one. And then third one was the Merlin Chimel. And he made the great, the great New Year's festival that Tibetans enjoy very much because it's a vacation for 2 weeks from work. They get off work for 2 weeks. And then, of course, the monks walk around town and they become the police chief. And he did that, and then he offered to the Joro Rinpoche his golden ornaments, which why did he was a monk, why did he put royal ornaments on Joro Rinpoche? So what that was affirming that Shakyamuni Buddha didn't leave. I was looking on my phone for a wonderful, in his Leixing Rinpo Chua, the small essence of true eloquence, he writes about how when he realized a little more about the non-duality of the absolute and the relative, he was so grateful to Shakyamuni, and then he felt very sad that Shakyamuni had gone and he didn't meet him. And then he has a vision of Shakyamuni. He writes in that poem And then that made him feel fine, and he didn't let his mind go into sort of being morose because Sjbccny had gone later, because he realized the Sjbccny Buddha is still here. Because Buddhas they're not like the Lone Ranger. They don't leave town after fixing up the situation. They just leave their body to give a teaching about impermanence, but they don't leave, because how could you leave? What Buddhahood means is that you experience yourself as everybody. So that's a weird thing. You know, you suddenly, if you imagine you're sitting in this room, each one inside their own skin, listening with their ears or looking with their eyes, and I'm me, I'm not you, no, you know, and everyone is like that. But if you're Buddha, apparently you have a weird experience where you think you're everybody, and you're looking from you're inside and outside of everybody equally to yourself, which is why Buddha is serving people and not bossing them around. Actually, he's so great, you know. Because he thinks he is everybody. So therefore he's the greatest teacher, because he knows just what the stupid student is thinking and what they need to help them get smarter. See, that's why he is like that. He doesn't just do it by guesswork. He actually fully reads the mind of everybody, and by reading it is because he thinks he is everybody. You know, the Dharmakaya is unlimited, right? So it's in everything, including every sentient being. So to celebrate that, he created the Melam Chemo, which was where everybody should come from all the different schools to Lhasa and have 2 weeks remembering the Buddha's triumph. And it's the Dozang Lun, the famous story of the Dozang Lun, where Buddha defeats the false teachers, the teacher who teaches this and that. And what is the essence of that teaching? The essence of that teaching is that this is nirvana right now, right away. That's reality. The real reality is nirvana. He taught it already in the Four Noble Truths. And we all neglect it because we think, wait, oh no, I'm suffering, oh. But everybody knows that first, second, and fourth noble truths are relative reality. Only nirvana is the real reality, right? So therefore that means this is nirvana. And which is a very big, powerful idea, because it means that you don't have to go somewhere else to find nirvana, like in dualistic Buddhism, in individual vehicle Buddhism, thinking nirvana is like in Nirvana is, you know, in Seattle or something, or in California. You know, you don't have to do that. This is Nirvana, and then however, I don't know it, so therefore I'm miserable, and I think that's so terrible, and, you know, I hate the president, and I do, actually, and a lot of other people, and the dictators of the communist countries, I don't like them, but actually it's all Nirvana anyway. It's just they don't know, they're more stupid even than me, if it's possible, but it's about the same. So that's a very deep thing, because I think that's why some people didn't like J. Rinpoche's thing, because they were used to being big shot lamas and everybody bowing to them all the time. And actually, if you understand equality, the wisdom of equality, then Buddha is even more everybody else's friend. You know, Bodhisattva vows to be even the ground under people's feet. And Buddha can make the ground, you know, it's according to Buddhists, not to materialists, but according to Buddhists. That's a fact. And I was so lucky, someone once asked me to translate Vimalakirti Sutra. And the big thing about Vimalakirti Sutra is that this is Sjbccny Buddha's Buddha land. Just get over it. The fact that you're not living in a lotus with a duck going by going quack, the Four Noble Truths, you know, like in Amitabha's Pure Land. They also made Pure Lands for certain people. But, you know, that's kind of more fancy, heavenly type of land. But actually, this here is a heavenly type of land if we understood it, which we don't. I mean, some of you may. Some Rinpoches might do that. I don't know. But most of us don't, okay? So that is the basis of his offering these jewels to Jo Rinpoche in the Melam Chemo, is that the Sambhogakaya, the Longjichiku, the Longku is always here. And Sjbccny, and of course Choku is always here. So Sjbccny just withdrew that particular emanation body, the supreme Paramanirmanakaya, Choki Choku. He removed that to teach impermanence to people, that they were all going to die. But he's still here, completely managing this world to get the best of all possible opportunities for all the beings in it, okay? And then the final of the four deeds was where he created three-dimensional mandalas of the Sangde Jigsum in Ganten Monastery. In the Vaishali, actually Yangbajen temple, which he specially built for that, right? Which was, I think, destroyed. And you guys you're not Gandhama, but Jimbala is a Gandhama. But what do they know about those deities that were in those three-dimensional mandalas? They say they were the size of a 3-year-old. The day made of gilded bronze, you know, that must have been so beautiful. And I know I'm going to stop soon, yes. I'm getting there. So that's it. That's his fourth deed. The fourth deed is not building Gandhan Monastery. It's building within Gandhan Monastery a special temple named after the city Vaishali, actually, where Vimalakirti lived, actually, and which was where he taught also the medicine Buddha teaching. He taught near Vaishali. So Vaishali was a big metropolis, apparently, in those days, like Los Angeles or something. And finally, so what he did, what I call it is he created in Tibetans a culture based on what I call millennial consciousness. And what I mean by that, you know, for example, most religions live in what is called a pre-millennial consciousness. That is to say, like the Christians are waiting for Jesus to come back. And then they think there'll be a big war and it'll be like that, you know. And the Muslims are waiting for the Mahdi to come. And the Hindus are waiting for Kalki to come. And so they're into this thing of like, oh, Buddha, and the form of Buddhism, even Kalachakra, you could get into that by you're waiting for Shambhala. And so meanwhile, you're just going to be a bandit or something until Shambhala happens, you know, just going to behave any old way because it doesn't matter because Buddha isn't here, or Jesus isn't here, or Muhammad isn't here. You know, it's like everything is wrong about the world because the great teacher, if you're a religious person, left, and then somebody's coming later. So what Rinpoche's realization of the non-duality made him realize that Buddha is here, and he symbolized that in the Molam Chimo by putting these ornaments on the Shakyamuni. And then this became the idea that Tibet was a special central country, what the Buddhists call, Ume Lam, you know, a country of the central presence of the Dharma. And so Tibetans, whether they fully understood it or not, they began to feel, well, I can't say I have an excuse not to try to live as a bodhisattva and be kind and restrain my negative emotions and my negative actions. I have no excuse that I'm just doing that because the world is Kali Yuga. The world is Nigdu. So I'm just going to behave like a Nigma. Not Nigma, but Nigma. I'm going to behave like a Kali Yuga person. I'm going to just be rough and tough or whatever, you know. And so the Tibetan culture is based on the idea that the Buddha presence is right here and that everyone can somehow be more Buddha by being more kind and more special and more self-concerned, and go to a monastery and attain. And, you know, historically, that consciousness still exists. You guys have it. And it's because why? It's a miracle of 80,000 people or 100,000 people who flee from a terrible, devastating invasion and torture and, you know, so-called ethnocide, you could call it. Almost genocide, but let's say ethnocide. And cultural, you know, genocide. And they come to a impoverished country, destitute. And then they have some who want to fight and attain independence and this and that, and, you know, there's some guerrillas in it, but still, then there's like 120,000 of them nowadays. And there's still 20 or 30,000 monks and nuns. 30% of still seeking some other life. They're not just want to make money or go back and fight and get their country back only. I mean, of course, everybody wants their country back. But the point is they're still keeping this consciousness that I have the opportunity as a human being to become something higher, different, better, enlightened, etc., right? Bodhisattva, Buddha, whatever you want to call it. That's like a miracle, actually. That's unheard of in history, actually. And it didn't happen easily, and it happened because of some leadership and some morphic resonance from the leadership, and also because it's in the culture. This is what I call millennial consciousness, which means a consciousness that fulfillment is available if you would put your mind to it. And you can't use a historical excuse or some social or cultural excuse to say that, well, I'm just going to do some bad stuff because everybody does it and it's all hopeless type of thing, right? Which would be Kali Yuga consciousness. So that was, I think, his great thing. And then one last thing, I know I'm going to stop, and it already stopped. It's just showing me a blank page. I want to say one last thing. This is not just a religious thing. This is because the Buddha Dharma is science. I'm sorry, those Westerners have been talking there for so long with His Holiness, and they have not sincerely really asked him even a single real question about his science. He kind of sneaks in a few things here and there, but they never do because they think science is, we own science, and it's materialism. You know, that's an absolute thing. They're a little bit crazy. That's because we Western people are a little crazy. You have to know that. Maybe you do know that. And I finally found out what the real craziness is. No, it's really crazy. If you die, you go to be nothing. So that means you think nothing is there waiting for you. So that means you think you discovered nothing. And that's the basis of your material science. There's nothing is awaiting you. No, what this really all here is nothing. So that's psychotic, that's crazy. You know, it's nothing. Oh, if I jump off a cliff, that'll be nothing. It won't be nothing. It'll smash your body, and it'll be painful, and then your mind will go out in a painful manner. And then you're going to be reborn in, I don't know, Syria or something, if you're lucky to be human. So the point is, nobody ever discovered nothing, and everybody knows nobody ever will discover nothing because it's not there. So no one can go to nothing. So therefore, everybody is always something. So therefore, the climate criminals today who are destroying the planet for all the other beings and doing the extinction, what they are doing is they're going to be reborn in a climate crisis. And they're going to be some sort of neurotic, radioactive fish crawling in some rotten, dirty, polluted stream downstream from one of those refineries, which they used to own, but they no longer can sign the checks for however many billions they had. So my point is, His Holiness is so kind, and Jimbala is so kind, they never really let on how crazy those people are. And me too, I'm part of that culture myself. If I discovered, when I die and I'm in the bardo and then somebody is telling me like, well, you shouldn't have done this or you should do that or whatever, I'll be surprised. Because in a way I grew up in this culture also. But you all can easily see what is the real problem. And that's why we're destroying the planet. Because we think it doesn't matter. We're reckless and careless because we think finally everything is nothing. That's our final dogma. And that's really crazy. And whereas Buddha, he has a science, karma is a biological theory, like Darwin's theory. It's not just some spiritual, mystical thing. It's biological theory. The way your mind is, if you act like a gorilla, you'll be reborn as a gorilla. Because your mind will seek that pattern, it's like a kedim. You're having a kedim of being, I used to say people who fly those bombers, they're going to be reborn as a dragonfly. Their wings like this, and no bombs, just a stinger, And they'll be upset at that time, They won't remember why. So anyway, that's the last thing I wanted to say. So therefore, Sjbccny, as a Renaissance man, and I won't go on now, but I wanted to say he was a great scientist. And he reinforced in people's minds around the planet, without them realizing it, that the human being can understand their world, they can take charge of their situations, they can make it beautiful, they can do this, and they can do that. Sort of got away from being under the church in Europe, of where God is doing everything and you're just a little thing that's bossed around by a high priest. And they started saying, we're going to try to fix things up. And then we started doing that. And then they were trapped where they put nothing in the place of God, which is their current problem. Okay? And Sjbccny can help with that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tulmanla. And now we have about 15 minutes Q&A session, and I would like to request everyone to please make your question brief and to the point.
the translator chiraya in Xiaomei Omedan Tomandela da Kewan number of Sangmala translation. The Nigida Tiwa the Garisna. Tamarang numbers Sanye Belula led you dead and Kiwangaji says Yorwa. What the Tangandu Sidangi Dangandu Luid and Sim Transarjela. Takiwa the Chima di Riba, Junchig Mess. That's in the number Sheva Lazura. What is Chima di Gun to Dang and what they will come in no answer.
It's just the default, it's the default possibility, put it that way. Once you recognize that nothing means nothing, that therefore you can't be nothing, and you realize that your consciousness is something. And it's like even the materialists have what they call the theory of the second law of thermodynamics. Not thermodynamics, thermodynamics. And the second law of thermodynamics is that no energy can ever be destroyed. It can become diffuse. They have entropy, they're scared of entropy. And it can become, it can change, of course, and it does change all the time. But it never destroyed, which in a way is an acknowledgement that energy can never become nothing. So consciousness is just some kind of very subtle energy, of course, which is operating to organize, operating through our extraordinary nervous system to organize our experience in some way. We are these amazing creatures that, we interpret what we see, we have language, etc. I mean, we're amazing. And we can understand exactly what we are, actually. That's what's amazing. Whereas other animals, and we have all been every other kind of animal, and those times we couldn't understand what we were doing. We just ran out and hunted for our supper, whatever. And now as humans we do that also, but we also can understand what we are. And then part of understanding that is that the most important thing to understand is our consciousness, because that is what organizes all of our experience. And it's a continuum. So after the physical body collapses, the idea that consciousness would continue is the default. It's the common sense thing. It's not a mystical thing. It's the ordinary thing. Majority of human beings have always felt that was the case. And because that's everything else in nature is always a continuity. There's no such radical, and there is no nothing. That's obviously, we have a word for something that doesn't exist, which is nothing. And so that's all I think. There's not really a lot to say. Taratuku, my friend Taratuku used to say, he didn't want to argue with people who said, oh, Rinpoche, I have a problem with this idea of the future life, and et cetera, And he said, I don't want to argue with you about it. He said, if you want to learn more about it, just read the newspaper. He used to say, just read the newspaper. And he was referring to the many stories in many newspapers where children remember people from previous lives and recognize them and do different things, and there's a lot of those kind of anecdotes that are studied. There was an institute in Virginia, University of Virginia, in the psych department, which documented tens of thousands of cases of children who remember previous lives in great detail and in convincing detail. And by Ian Stevenson was the man, and that was funded by the man who invented Xerox machine, Chester Carlson, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And so if you just read a lot of those stories, or in a Buddhist culture, you read the Jataka stories, and the more you read them, all the, Thunrap of the Buddha or other Thunraps, then it becomes more and more ordinary, more and more normal. You see, we grew up in a culture of dominated by materialist scientists as far as worldview goes. So to us it seems normal that, people say, I only got this one life to live, all this kind of stuff people say, Go for it, because you only live once, they all say that. But that's tough luck. They're going to live more times. And they behave like a jerk, and they're going to be reborn as a jerk. That's it. And in America, I always love to tell this to audiences, Because I always say it means that you should not be too harsh with your exes, because next life you'll fall in love again and they'll have a better lawyer. And people I get a lot of funny looks when I say that to an audience. There's a lot of divorce. Anyway, that's it.
Please raise your hands if you have questions.
Hello, Tashle. So I had one question: whether the Bodhisattva was an abstract idea or is it some real historical behind that, like the Bodhisattva Manjushri? Is it an abstract idea or is it the real historical figure like the Sjbccny Buddha? Have you got it?
Somebody historical? Yeah. Sure. Actually, Bodhisattva Manjushri, we say the sutras, he is actually Buddha. And Bodhisattva Manjushri is actually a Buddha and has a Buddha land. And his vow as a Buddha was to be a Bodhisattva in every world where there was another Buddha. And there's like infinite numbers of worlds. Oh, I heard a talk the other day by Deepak Chopra. He quoted some astrophysicists. In the Milky Way alone, there may be as many as 4 billion humanoid planets. Yeah, he gave such a figure. He had heard it from an astrophysicist. There's so many just in the Milky Way galaxy, and then there's trillions of galaxies. So, of course, in Buddhist culture, in Buddhist science, the idea of many, many different human planes is just common sense. It's like ordinary. You don't have to send out, like Carl Sagan, you don't have to send out Beatles music in a spaceship and hope that somebody calls you up from Alpha Centauri. Because there are infinite numbers of such planets, and when you die and you're in a subtle body, you can go to them all. And in some sutras, there are places where Buddha, before he teaches Prajnaparamita, actually, he sticks out his tongue, which is a huge tongue, actually. He has a really big tongue, Buddha. He can touch his forehead with his tongue. And it's wide also, a really big tongue. And he sticks it out, and a light comes out of his tongue. And all of the people attending his teaching on the transcendent wisdom, they see him teaching Prajnaparamita in infinite numbers of worlds, simultaneously, in other human worlds. So they sort of have a little vision like that, apparently, which could just be a special effect. It could be just sci-fi. But from the Buddhist point of view, there are many other such worlds. So that's what Manjushri is. And Manjushri, as a bodhisattva, what he does is he always goes to wherever there's a Buddha, and he makes the Buddha, by asking questions, he makes him talk about emptiness, about selflessness, about the profound, deep, ultimate reality questions. And then there's another nice thing I like about Manjushri, where he was a little critical of Avalokiteshvara and Sjbccny. He said, you guys, Sjbccny, you came to India, and then Chandrasekhar, he's going to help the Tibetans especially, and everywhere. And what about the Chinese? They're like poor things. They're out there flooded, and they're in rivers that flood, and on a floodplain, and they're building dikes, and they're running around. And no Buddha went there. So I'm going to go over and take care of the Chinese, he says. And then he makes Wu Tai-shen, Rio Zhengha. That's his pure land on earth. And he's supposedly helping the Chinese. And then Confucius has Ushnisha. Confucius has a cone head, like Sjbccny, He's a cone head. He has like a high thing on top of his head, a skull protrusion. And Confucius apparently had one of those. And then in that, according to that myth, we would say Confucius was Manjushri, we could say. the Chinese then later learning from Buddhists a little more relaxed. They have Lao Tzu going out and they think he's Buddha. So that's a way of, the Hindus used to do that. So that everyone is everybody else's major figure, and that makes them not want to kill each other. That's good, which is a nice thing, okay? So that's a little bit about Manjushri. But the main thing about Manjushri, however, for you and me, is that he represents the fact that you and me can fully understand our world. We don't have to just take anybody else's word for it. We need teaching to gear up and get critical and get away from all our conditioning. But every human being has the ability to understand everything, is the thing. And the really, I had one student, I'm going to mention, I don't know if I should mention his name, but I had one student named JD, initials JD, and he informed me once at a conference, "Oh, Bob, I want to just let you know, Buddhism doesn't really have science." I says, "John, what are you talking about?" He says, "Why?" I says, "Why?" And then he says, "They have no theory revision," he tells me. So, and then he ran away, of course. So I couldn't answer. So the idea that someone could understand everything is some sort of anathema to Western scientists, because they think reality is just material and no one can count all of the matter, And that's completely wrong. And besides, yes, Buddha understood everything, but there's always theory revision. You know why? Buddha was so cool. He says, "I understand everything and I'm so happy. And you can also understand it. But I'm so sorry, I can't really explain it to you." That's pretty cool. That means that it is beyond explanation. Although you can give kind of vectors and you can perspectives where you might have a chance of experiencing what reality is, but just by someone explaining it, just by listening to the explanation, you're not going to know it. You can only use that to cultivate a little bit your understanding. So therefore, he was anti-dogmatic from the beginning by saying that no dogma can capture reality. You have to personally experience it. And you can't, but then the main thing that Manjushri is pushing is that you can do that. So you should never stop educating yourself. You should never stop learning. You should never stop trying to understand everything by saying, "Oh, I'm stupid, I can't understand. Oh, I didn't go to college, I can understand. Oh, I didn't get a PhD, I can understand." That's ridiculous. Every human being can understand everything. That's what Buddha taught us. And that's why I liked Buddha from when I was 20 years old. I liked him.
Thank you. I think we will conclude here the Q&A session and to move on to our next presenter. And then at the end of the third presenter, at the end of this first session, then if there are still some time, then we can do more Q&A session at the end of the first part. So our next presenter, we have Venerable Sjbccny, and the highly venerated, the 8th Kangsa Rinpoche, whom at the age of 5 was recognized as the reincarnation of the 7th Kangsa Rinpoche, who was one of the 3 High Lamas responsible for searching the 14th reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Kangsa Rinpoche started a basic study of Buddhist philosophy at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics at Dharamsala, and thereafter he completed advanced Buddhist studies on Sutra and Tantra in Sarajay Monastic University in South India. And in 2002, Rinpoche obtained his Geshe Haramba degree and composed a text entitled Commentary on Abhidharma. In the same year, Rinpoche was invited as a visiting professor at the Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, Nepal. In 2007, Rinpoche founded the Himalayan Buddhist Heritage Foundation based in Kathmandu, Nepal. In 2011, Rinpoche founded the Foundation for the Preservation of Atisha Buddhist Heritage. And in 2012, Rinpoche established the Dipankara Buddhist Organization in Taiwan. And in 2013, Rinpoche was awarded an honorable medal by the governor of Khenti province in Mongolia. And currently, Rinpoche serves as one of the prominent professor and spiritual teacher at the Sarajay Monastic University in South India. So, please, Councillor Muchela.
Lama Sanje Lama Chutese Lama Gende de Kunji Cheba Lama the Lama Namla Chanselo. First of all, I would like to start by thanking Sjbccny Buddhist Culture Center for organizing the seminar, and also I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak. Actually, my topic is, as you can see, it's about wisdom and compassion in Tibetan Buddhism. But rather than discussing the philosophy behind the compassion, I would like to talk about compassion in the action and why it's important to go beyond having an emotional response for the others, but actually we go out and do something for the benefit of others. I always believe that compassion cannot simply be a philosophy. Sometimes we spend the time thinking about others and theorizing about the compassion, but we need to take a step further and change the compassion from philosophy to an action. It was quite a long time back. It's a quite long time back. I was walking down street into Nepal, and I saw the one man who was dig through the trash to pick out a piece of the bread that someone else threw away. I saw him pick that piece of the bread from the trash and eating it. I was seeing that. I was so upset. I was not only that upset, I felt very strong compassion toward that person. So then one question came into my mind. What is a life? What is a life? While not all of us had been the poor or desperate for the food, we can understand this man's pain and be compassionate towards him. So at that moment, I realized the one thing. Compassion cannot stop with just as emotion. Compassion cannot stop with just as emotion. That moment I decided to start the food charity to actually to reach out and feed those who do not have the food. Even just for one meal, it's very important that this action can relieve the desperation for food. I found it out that compassion in action is very needed. So that's why my foundation have a branch in the Vietnam. So in that location, we started to Food for the Poor charity. I started this food project only with $300 in my hand. I started in the 10th of November 2016, and you can see up till now we delivered 147,000 free vegetarian meals provided to the needy people in Ho Chi Minh City in the Vietnam. I start with this just only with the $300 in my hand. That time, when I started that time, I never think that whether I can. I never consider what if, or maybe this could work or not. Only I know the one thing, I must do it. Now you can see, so consistently, weekly basis, we are delivering the 1,223 meals, the prepared and the provided and the delivered. The meals are delivered on every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday in the 4 different locations in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. This is in the location 1. You can see that my student, when they go and they deliver the food, I used to tell them, don't think only to feed the body, think also feed the soul. They deliver the food, they talk with these homeless people, they share the time with these homeless people. Before we go to deliver the food, we bless the food with the Guru Puja. So you can see that this is the location 1, District 2 in Ho Chi Minh City. Free meals given to the poor immigrants, homeless, sick, disabled people, elderly people without caregivers and poor workers. Every Thursday morning, 360 free meals per week in the location 1, in District 2. This is in the location number 2. We are delivering 250 free meals per week. This is in the location 3. In the location 3, the volunteers, they used to carry the food and go and distribute. They go to distribute the food to the poor people. And we are distributing 330 free meals per week. Now, this is in location 4, Phu District in Ho Chi Minh City. Every Friday morning, we are delivering 180 free meals per week. So as I mentioned before, when I began that food charity, I had only $300 to support it. But now it has grown. And we continue to feed those who are in need. One thing, I had such a very deep and a very heart-touching experience that one time when I was in Mongolia, one woman heard about that's my foundation for charity. She donated her wedding ring to this project. One thing, she was not widowed, she was not divorced. She was still married to her husband. Even she donated her wedding ring. Her donation was so moving. Her action inspired me and my foundation. People who work in my foundation, all we were very inspired by her donation, and her action inspired me, especially me, to continue my work. Today, why I'm sharing all this thing with you is that I think that my talk can provide you all with the insight as to why the compassion in the action is so important. We have to take our philosophy of the compassion to move forward to benefit other people. So that's why I was a Sjbccny monastery teacher. Now I'm not a teacher. I was teaching a philosophy in the Sjbccny monastery. Maybe I should say I was a philosopher before. Now I'm not a philosopher at all. Because I always believe the one thing, nowadays I believe the one thing that sometimes we have to do something. Sometimes we have to come out of this old philosophy theory and come out and do something and benefit the peoples. So that's why. So I hope. So andi jamaach to we thagi gonda di jama thagi no de thangbuch to gonda. And thangbuch. Yeah. So one thing is that this November, the month is very special. Month is special, as you can see that I started this food charity activity on the 10th of the November 2016. So today I got the opportunity, this opportunity in the November, so I feel the November month is very special for me. So one thing that while I was carrying all this project, I learned the one thing, that I should keep on to continue this project, and in 2020, we are bringing the same model of this project, food project, to the Nepal and the Mongolia. I was born in Nepal. And I spoke especially in the government hospitals in Nepal. Because in the Nepal was so poor country. I see that a lot of the poor people comes from the very remote area to the government hospitals, and the family of the sick people, even they could not get the proper meal. So I spoke with the government official. I spoke with the hospital directors that I want to carry the food project in the hospital. They are so happy. They are so happy, and they told me the one thing, very heart-touching thing. They told me that the food project, that food, when you bring it in the hospital, that can save a lot of the people's life. So that's why I just want to share with you that, as I mentioned before, so compassion, we should not stop the compassion just as feeling as an emotion. We have to bring the compassion into action. Thank you so much. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rumchala. And now we probably can have one question and then move on to our next presenter, and then probably we'll have more questions at the end of that. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. And please have your question written down so you don't forget for later at the end of the presenter. So go ahead, please.
I'm just coming to the end of my university studies, and so I'm trying to decide what I want to do for the rest of my life. So very confusing time in my life, and so my Amla Bala have brought me to America to study and do well and get a good job. So I've been thinking, I should just follow that path and become for me a computer scientist. But I also feel what you were saying, compassion and action. So I was wondering what you think would be even any advice for me, and how to navigate finding my compassionate job or something like that, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Okay. Take it as a joke, okay? Join my foundation. Okay, join my foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Join my foundation and work for my foundation and help the poor people. I'm just kidding, okay? Okay, so what will I share with you? That I think that sometimes in your life, you have to follow your passion. Because I was born in the family, very traditional, the family, and very